Am I on? All right, it is 12 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started with this month's Wellbeing webinar. My name is Sage Musson. I am a registered dietitian and a Kinetiq Health Program Manager here at Apex Benefits, so thank you for joining us. Many of you may not know, but March is National Nutrition Month. It probably means more to me as a nutrition professional than the average person, but we couldn't let this month go by without doing a webinar focused on nutrition. So today we're going to be talking about nutrition hacks for busy lives. I love this topic because I think this is something that a lot of us struggle with. Whether you are busy because you're a parent, or you're busy with your job and career, or maybe you just have a buzzing social life and lots of hobbies to stay on track of. But either way, nutrition can sometimes fall to the wayside when it comes to a busy schedule. So I'm hoping that each of you will walk away today with some tips and tricks to help you if this is something that you're struggling with in your everyday busy life. Before we get started, we have some webinar housekeeping. My clicker is not working. I'm going to have my colleague in the room help me out here, make sure we're moving to the next slide. Does not want me to move to the next slide. All right, some webinar housekeeping today. All attendees will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. If you have questions or comments, please use the chat box that's located in the right-hand side of your webinar screen. I do have a colleague in the room who's going to help me with questions at the end, so hopefully we have time. For audio access, attendees can use your computer audio or you can call in using your phone. And lastly, presentation slides can be downloaded by clicking the icon on the right-hand side of your webinar screen. With that, we will go ahead and get started. So our learning objectives today are to review common challenges of balancing nutrition habits with a busy schedule. We're going to discuss habits that are slowing you down and may be preventing you from seeing results no matter what your goals are. We're going to outline a healthy dietary pattern. And lastly, we're going to review strategies and tips to improve nutrition habits with a busy schedule. So first, I want to start off with a question, and I want you guys to ask yourself, what are some challenges that someone with a busy schedule may face when it comes to nutrition and health? This might be, challenges that you personally struggle with. These might be challenges that you've heard a coworker, a family member, or a friend talk about. Whatever the case may be, I want you to think about that. I will say that as a professional myself, something that I hear from a lot of people that I work with when it comes to these challenges would be, time constraints or like feeling like you have a lack of time to focus on nutrition. Or maybe it's stress or emotional eating, or maybe it's just decision fatigue. So it gets to be the end of the day and you can't think about, what you want to eat or what you should be making for a meal. So those are some different challenges that I see pretty often, but I want you to think about your biggest struggle and keep that kind of in the back of your mind throughout this presentation. And again, hopefully by the end of this, you walk away with some tips and tricks that will help you feel like you can conquer that struggle. So first, I want to talk about some habits that might be slowing you down. And I think this is really important to start out with because a lot of us do tend to have these habits if you have a busy schedule. And I think it's important to educate and kind of give you the background on why these habits might be causing more harm than good in your everyday lives. So we're going to talk more in depth about skipping meals, cutting out entire food groups, too little protein and fiber, and poor hydration. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time today to get to poor sleep and stress management in depth, but I did want to include them on this slide because I think they're really, really important. And I do want to point out that in my sources slide later in this presentation, I do have some sources that you can read more into these and how they affect your nutrition habits and your overall health because they are very important. So with that, first, I want to talk about skipping meals. Overall, this is a stressor for your bodies. When you are not adequately providing your body the nutrients and the energy that it needs to function properly, your body is stressed out. So overall, this can lead to imbalanced blood sugar and increased cortisol production. Some of the first symptoms that we see when we're having an imbalanced blood sugar or increased cortisol production are things like hunger, which if you don't know what that means, it's basically combining hungry and angry. So you're hangry. You're angry because you're hungry, right? Or you might have headaches. You might see increased sugar and caffeine cravings. So our bodies are really great at craving the things that it needs. So if you're low on energy and you're needing more energy, your body's going to crave sugar and caffeine because it gives us that quick energy burst. Or you'll notice that you have poor energy and focus. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'll spare you the whole science lesson, but blood sugar is very, very important for a lot of processes in our body. It's important for each of us to have balanced blood sugar throughout the day, and the number one way to achieve that is eating regularly. So as you can imagine, if you're skipping meals or you're going a long time without eating regularly, your blood sugar is going to drop, and that's when you're going to start to notice these symptoms. Along with that, increased cortisol production also can lead to these symptoms. And again, to spare you the science lesson, just a quick background on cortisol, it is considered like the stress hormone. So it is important for pretty much every organ and tissue in our body to function properly. So we don't want increased cortisol production. It can lead to, over time, a lot of inflammation within the body, which can increase your risk for developing chronic diseases. It can affect our blood sugar, our metabolism, our hormone production. So overall, not something that we want to have. Again, skipping meals can lead to both of these things. So not something that we want to be doing regularly. So I want you to remember food is energy. And if you aren't eating regularly, you're not going to have the energy to feel your best or function your best. Next up, we have cutting out entire food groups. This is something that I commonly see with, new diets or fads on the internet or social media. Whatever the case may be, a lot of times they are sometimes demonizing an entire food group. But overall, this is a really ineffective way to cut out calories, depending on what your goals are. Because you could be missing out on important nutrients when you cut out an entire food group, which in turn is going to harm your physical and your mental health. So instead, I really encourage people to focus on the most nutritious foods from each of these food groups. So an example of this might be, let's say that you typically make a sandwich with white bread. And not to say that white bread is bad. I don't believe in good or bad foods. But there are some more nutritious options that you can make your sandwich from, including whole grain bread. You're going to include more fiber with whole grain bread. You're going to get more vitamins and minerals. So that's focusing on a more nutritious food from each of those food groups. Or let's say that you typically bring a salad for lunch every day, and it's really just like your salad greens and some vegetables. But if you try to include some grilled chicken or edamame, chickpeas, whatever the case may be, you're adding more nutritious foods from other food groups to get a more balanced meal, and therefore you're getting more fiber, protein, and vitamins and minerals. So that's what I mean when I say focusing on the most nutritious foods from each of those food groups. On the topic of protein and fiber, I know I've mentioned it a couple of times already. Too little protein and fiber could also be slowing down your progress or hindering you from seeing results. So I want to point out that these are really important for increasing your satiety and your fullness. And if you aren't familiar with the difference between feeling satiated and full, satiation means the feeling of being satisfied after eating enough. And fullness is the physical feeling of feeling full after eating enough. So both of these help significantly if you have a goal of weight loss or weight maintenance. As you can imagine, making sure that you're getting enough protein and fiber, if they make you feel satisfied and full, they're going to help make sure that you don't get cravings throughout the day and you don't have that ongoing need or feeling like you need to keep eating. I also want to point out that protein and fiber help our bodies better regulate blood sugar because it takes our bodies a little bit more time to break these down. And so the longer it takes for our bodies to absorb and break down nutrients, the longer our blood sugar stays stable, which we've already kind of talked about the importance of blood sugar. I'm sure many of us know that protein is very important for muscle gain and maintenance. But I wanted to point out for women specifically, we start to lose muscle mass and bone density as early as age 30, which I know is very alarming for me. I'm turning 30 this year. So it's extra important that we get adequate protein every day at our meals, even in snacks if possible, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now I want to talk more specifically about fiber. And so I probably should have said this earlier, but if you're not familiar with what foods typically contain fiber, it's going to be things like your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, pretty much anything plant-based is going to be high in fiber. Fiber is super important for digestion, just making sure that everything moves through smoothly, if you know what I mean. Also, it's very underrated for lowering cholesterol levels. So a lot of times when we're doing coaching calls with people and they come to us and they say, my cholesterol is really increased, it's in the high range, what can I be doing? One of the first things I'm going to look at is your fiber intake, because fiber can significantly help lower cholesterol levels. And it also, again, slows down that absorption of meals, which helps keep us, a stable blood sugar throughout the day. So we always want to make sure we're including fiber at our meals, ideally snacks too, if possible. The recommended amount of fiber per day for the average adult is 25 grams. I will say most Americans do not meet this recommendation, unfortunately. So I would encourage you to kind of take a closer look at your fiber intake and just see, how close you are to that 25 gram mark and what can you add to maybe meet that recommendation each day. Again, really comes from plant-based foods. So on that note, I want to talk about how to build balanced meals and snacks. And if you've ever read one of my blog posts or seen one of my Better Health in 90s or even past webinars that I've done, you've probably heard me talk about how to build a balanced meal. So I don't want to harp on this too much, but I do think it's important to recognize this image. That way, no matter where you are, you know how to build a balanced meal for yourself. With a busy schedule, it's realistically, you're going to be dining out every once in a while. And so it's important that you know what can I be including in my meals when maybe I don't have the most control to still have a balanced meal and meet these food groups and these proportions. So let's say, for instance, that you didn't pack your lunch, you didn't have time with your busy schedule, and so you're going to head to Chipotle. Sodium content aside, you can actually make a pretty balanced meal at Chipotle. Let's say that you're getting a bowl and you have them add, rice, whichever kind of rice, your preference. You have them add chicken, you have them add some beans, pico, a little bit of corn salsa, lettuce, even a little bit of cheese. You've pretty much met every single food group and almost in the same proportions as what's in this image. You've got your lean protein, you've got your whole grains, you've got your veggies, and you've even got a little bit of dairy in there too. So it is possible. Again, not saying that I want you to eat Chipotle at every single meal, but I think recognizing this image and just kind of knowing how to build a balanced meal for yourself can be really practical when you're in those situations. One thing that I don't talk about as often is how to build good snacks. Obviously, with a snack, we're not going to want you to meet every single one of the same recommendations for a meal. It's not supposed to be that big. But my quick equation for building a good snack is try to pair a protein and a carbohydrate food. Ideally, a high fiber carbohydrate if you can, but regardless, we want to pair a protein and a carb. So some examples that would be really great that are quick, easy, on the go even. Let's say that you get like a cup of Greek yogurt. That's going to be your protein, and you just pair it with some apple slices, and that's going to be your high fiber carb. Or you could go with a cheese stick, which is going to be your protein, and you could do some whole grain crackers, which is going to be high fiber carb. So again, those are super easy. Don't make it more complicated than it has to be. But also I want to point out that snacks can absolutely be a part of a balanced diet. I think snacks sometimes get a bad rep because they're just considered extra calories that aren't needed. But again, if you are maybe wanting to have more stable blood sugar throughout the day, you notice that you start to feel hungry, snacks can be really beneficial. The last habit that I want to talk about that might be slowing you down from seeing results is poor hydration. And I'll be the first to raise my hand on this one. I struggle with this. It is a daily struggle for me. I sometimes make jokes that I'm built different and I can just, function being dehydrated, but I'll be the first to tell you that when I am properly hydrated, I feel much better than on the days that I'm not drinking enough water. So take it from me. This is very, very important. Some of the things you're going to notice that if you're not drinking enough water throughout the day is increased fatigue, poor digestive function, headaches are really common if you're dehydrated. But I also want to point out that sometimes we confuse thirst for hunger. So a lot of times people are like, I'm constantly hungry. But when we look at their water intake, they're drinking almost no fluids throughout the day. And they're actually kind of confusing thirst for hunger. It's a little bit trickier because we don't always have the same symptoms when we're dehydrated. It's kind of, you're already dehydrated when you're feeling thirsty. So this can be tricky. And a question that I get a lot is, well, how much water should I be drinking? And I think a lot of us grew up on you're supposed to drink 8 cups of water a day. Well, that's not really an individualized recommendation. But a good rule of thumb that is a little bit more individualized is to take half of your body weight in pounds, and that's how many ounces of water you should be drinking per day. So if we've got a 150-pound individual, we would recommend at least 75 ounces of water per day. Again, this doesn't, it's not completely individualized. Some people might be working out a lot, sweating a lot, then your water intake is going to change based off of that. But this is a good starting point for most people. My tip on water intake, which again, I'm not the best person at this, but what I try to do is always keep a water bottle with me. It's kind of like a visual reminder. So if it's in front of you, it might be a good reminder that you need to drink more water. Some people even have like apps or they get like notifications reminding them. Whatever works for you, I just want to make sure that you all understand that this should not be left to the wayside. We want to make sure that you're properly hydrated. You're going to feel your best. Your body's going to function much better. So with that, I don't want to only talk about the things that you might be doing wrong. You might be wondering, well, yes, maybe I know that I do some of these habits, so where should I start to make changes? And that's most importantly what we're going to be talking about today. So my first recommendation is I want you to meet yourself where you're at. I don't want you to focus on things that are too hard to reach or maybe just not even something that you should really be focusing on first. I want you to meet yourself where you're at. So focus on small, impactful habits first. This is what I call like the low-hanging fruit. What is easily within reach that's going to have a big impact if you work on those first. For some people, I know we didn't go into details about sleep today, but for some people, they might notice that when they don't get good sleep or they don't get enough sleep, they make poor nutrition choices the next day. So they really want to focus on sleep. Or maybe it's your water intake, like me, it's a constant struggle. Or maybe you just want to focus on eating consistently, trying to get your blood sugar stable. Or maybe you just want to focus on eating protein and fiber at each meal. No matter what the amount is, you just want to have a protein and a fiber source at each meal. So those are what I would call small, impactful habits. They're going to have a big impact, but they may not really change your normal habits or daily routine much. Next, so, when thinking of those low-hanging fruit, pick 1 to 3 small goals at a time that you want to focus on. So if you try to focus on 10 things all at once, maybe you just heard me talk about these habits and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to change this, 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 and this. Focusing on all this stuff all at once is really overwhelming, and that's where we see people fall off when it comes to their goals and their challenges. So we want you to pick 1 to 3 small goals at a time, focus on those first. Once you feel confident, once you're, it's not using as much brain power for you to follow through on those, then we can maybe add 1 to 2 other small goals into the mix. Try to write these goals down somewhere where you're seeing them regularly. For some people, they love to, write things on their to-do list so they can cross it off every day. If that's you, write your goals down there. It's important that you just focus on small things at once. This is going to lead to longer term success. All right. We don't want you to get overwhelmed. Lastly, on this slide, a mindset that I try to encourage people to adopt is what can you add to your routine versus what do you need to get rid of? Again, it's going to be really overwhelming if you're just sitting here telling yourself, okay, I need to stop doing this. I can't have this anymore. I need to stop this, this, and this. Instead, what can you add to your routine? So an example of this might be, let's say that you drink a lot of soda and you know that it's probably a lot of extra calories and a lot of added sugar that you don't necessarily need. Instead of telling yourself, I can never drink soda again, it needs to be completely out of the house, I can't ever have it, which is going to be really overwhelming. Also, as soon as you tell yourself that you can't have something, we all want it 10 times more, right? So instead of telling yourself you can't have soda anymore, instead say, you know what, I'm going to add 75 ounces of water to my day. You're going to add that into your routine. A lot of times when we focus on what to add versus what to eliminate, it just kind of pushes out those non-desirable habits or choices anyway. So what can you add versus what to eliminate? This step, I cannot stress enough. This is pretty much a non-negotiable. Even if you have a super busy schedule, you have to plan ahead. And honestly, this goes for a lot of habits that are even outside of nutrition. You have to plan ahead. You have to look at your schedule and kind of make a plan to be successful. So my biggest recommendation when it comes to planning ahead for nutrition habits is I want you to look at your schedule for the week. For some of us, we might just be looking at our own schedule. For others, you might be looking at your spouse's schedule and your kids' schedule and all kinds of things, and you might be taking that into account. But based off of that schedule, plan your meals and snacks for the week. This should really only take like 10 to 15 minutes. Even for somebody with a busy schedule, you should be able to find 10 to 15 minutes somewhere that you can plan those meals and snacks so that you're set up for success during the week. Try to include family members if that's going to be helpful in making sure that everybody's happy. But when you're looking at your schedule, also I want you to realistically figure out when am I going to have to probably dine out throughout the week. again, with a busy schedule, it's going to be inevitable. So you want to plan ahead for it. Can you figure out where you're going to get food from ahead of time, maybe even what you're going to order? That way, when we talked about, the challenge of decision fatigue at the very beginning of this presentation, when it gets to time that, it's that time to eat, you already know either what meal you're going to be making, where you're going to be getting food from, and what you're going to be ordering. Again, planning should really only take 10 to 15 minutes. This is different than meal prepping. So meal prepping is like making your food in bulk, taking a lot of time to make it and then kind of eating on that throughout the week. If meal prepping works for you and you have the time, awesome. I will say for a lot of people with a busy schedule, it's hard to find, an hour or two on the weekend or sometime during the week to meal prep. Some people also get tired of eating the same thing over and over. So it's not always the best choice for everybody, but planning ahead is something that we should all be doing if we want to be successful. And then lastly, I want to point out, with a busy schedule, try to utilize grocery pickup or delivery. Free grocery pickup and delivery was like one of the best things to come from COVID. So definitely use this to your advantage as much as possible. So after you're planning your meals and snacks for the week, kind of figure out what you already have, what you need to pick up at the grocery, do a quick grocery order, everything will be ready for you. I also want you to focus on capitalizing on windows of time. So with a busy schedule, obviously your time is limited, but I want you to try to take lunch and outdoor breaks when possible. I had a coworker not long ago tell me that anytime a meeting gets done early, she tries to take that extra time and go for a walk, which I think is brilliant. So let's say that you have an hour-long meeting, it gets done after 45 minutes, you've got 15 minutes that you could capitalize on that window of time, whether it's taking a walk, whether it's planning your meals for the week, doing a grocery order, whatever the case may be, try to use that time to your advantage. And I think really the first step in that is just being more aware of how you're using your time. So I wanted to point that out as well. Another really important thing that you can use to capitalize on windows of time is developing morning and nighttime routines. And I won't go into a lot of detail on this just for the sake of time today, but a colleague and I did do a webinar on this in 2024, so you can find that on the Apex website. But we go into detail on, the benefits of developing morning and nighttime routines, how to do that. So I think these can significantly improve your sleep, which again, we didn't go into a whole lot of detail on, but it is very important for our nutrition and our health habits. But it is also really important for our mental well-being, and it sets your tone for the day. So like I already mentioned, try to use extra time for meal planning when you can, because like I said, that step is pretty much a non-negotiable. And one last reminder is I want to remind you all that you aren't going to be 100% perfect all of the time. None of us are perfect. Your meals aren't going to be perfect either. So what I want you to focus on is consistency over perfectionism. So if we can stay consistent, one meal that isn't the most healthy option isn't going to completely derail your progress. Move on at the next one, move on the next day, whatever the case may be. We want to stay consistent as much as possible instead of focusing on perfectionism. I also like to point out to people that I love that we can work smarter, not harder, and that goes for nutrition as well. So I might get some, feedback on this, but I am a big believer that frozen, canned, and even processed foods can be really helpful for making quick, easy, balanced meals. I've worked with a lot of people, and we're able to fit these in that are still healthy options if that works for you. So just know that these can still be options. If you get your vegetables from frozen or canned foods, I'm perfectly happy with that versus you not getting those vegetables or that fiber in at all. And then lastly, I want you to make sure that you celebrate your achievements. This is really important to help the motivation when you're working on your nutrition habits. So, make sure you celebrate yourself, but also share your achievements with the people that care about you and will celebrate with you. I think that's really, really important to keep the motivation going and keep yourself on track. I also just want to point out one more thing, and that is that, you develop your nutrition habits over a long period of time. So you can't expect to change one thing overnight. It's going to take some time to kind of undo those habits that are less desirable. So don't be too hard on yourself. That's really where celebrating your achievements comes in as well. So these are the sources that I mentioned earlier. If you are interested more in, things like blood sugar balance, cortisol, sleep, stress management, and how those affect nutrition habits, feel free to visit these resources. But now I will go ahead and see if we have any questions. and it doesn't look like we do. All right. Next month, please join us for our April webinar, which is Understanding Your Dental Insurance, which will be with our Client Services team. And I want to thank you all again for joining me. Please let me know if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your day.